Standing at the altar, Sophia felt a tremor course through her as she prepared to marry the city's most formidable mafia boss, a desperate act to save her ailing mother. To her, he was a cold, ruthless enigma, a stranger who had acquired her as if she were mere property to settle a debt. Yet, an untold truth lingered. For a decade, he had been her unseen guardian, silently watching, protecting, and loving her from the shadows, meticulously orchestrating every event to finally claim her as his own. Do you, Sophia Elizabeth Chen, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The pronouncement reverberated through the grand cathedral, echoing like a death knell in Sophia's ears. Her hands quivered, clenching the white roses in her bouquet, their thorns piercing her silk gloves, a stark reminder that even beauty could draw blood. A suffocating tightness gripped her chest. The wedding gown, more opulent than her family's entire home, felt like a restrictive garment. 200 guests watched from the pews, their faces a blur of luxurious suits and sparkling jewelry. But none of them mattered. Only one face held her captive, the man directly before her, his dark eyes piercing her soul with an intensity that rendered her knees weak. Lorenzo Moretti, the man she was moments away from marrying, a man she feared more profoundly than death itself. Sophia's voice cracked. Her gaze darted toward the third pew on the left, where her mother sat in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes barely concealed beneath the beautiful scarf Sophia had carefully arranged that morning. Chemotherapy had robbed her mother's physical strength, but not the desperate glimmer of hope in her eyes. $300,000. That was the crushing sum of their medical bills, the debt that had driven them to loan sharks, ultimately leading her to this stark moment, Sophia exchanging her freedom for her mother's life. "I do," she whispered, the words rasping against her throat like shards of glass. Lorenzo's expression remained unchanged, his face seemingly sculpted from marble, beautiful, cold, and utterly unreadable. At 28, he was already a legend in Chicago's underworld. Some whispered of him as the ghost. For those who crossed him, simply vanished. Others muttered far worse, though never within his hearing, lest they wished to cease breathing. Sophia had encountered him only 3 times before this day. Once, at her waitressing job, when he entered the diner with 4 men in black suits, his presence draining all air from the room. Once, outside the hospital, leaning against a sleek black car, watching her through the glass doors as she held her mother's hand during chemotherapy. And finally, in a loan shark's office, where he presented the offer that brought her here. "Marry me, and your mother's debt vanishes." He hadn't needed to finish the sentence regarding refusal. Everyone knew the grim fate of those indebted to Lorenzo Moretti's associates. As the priest continued the solemn ceremony, Sophia meticulously studied her new husband's face, searching for any flicker of emotion. His black hair was impeccably styled, and his expensive tuxedo fit him like a second skin. He was undeniably handsome, possessing a dangerous allure that could compel intelligent women to act foolishly. But his eyes, his eyes were like gazing into a frozen lake, beautiful yet terrifying, with unknown depths that threatened to consume anyone who dared to look too long. "Do you, Lorenzo Antonio Moretti, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, confident, imbued with the authority of a man unaccustomed to hearing no. As he uttered those 2 words, a shiver traced down Sophia's spine. There was something in his tone, not quite possessiveness, but something perilously close, making her feel like a moth drawn irrevocably to a flame. The priest smiled, oblivious to the palpable tension between the bride and groom. "You may now kiss the bride." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment she had dreaded all week. Lorenzo moved closer, his hands gently framing her face with surprising tenderness. His fingers felt warm against her skin, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, an expensive masculine fragrance that made her head swim. For a fleeting second, his mask slipped. Something flickered in those dark eyes, a look almost akin to pain. But before Sophia could comprehend what she'd witnessed, his lips were upon hers. The kiss was soft, brief, and utterly unlike anything she had anticipated from a man of his fearsome reputation. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds, yet it felt like an eternity. When he pulled away, his face had reverted to its customary inscrutability, leaving Sophia to wonder if that moment of vulnerability had been merely her imagination. The cathedral erupted in applause. Rice and flower petals cascaded around them as they walked back down the aisle, arm in arm. Sophia's legs felt like jelly, but Lorenzo's grip on her arm was steadfast, guiding her through the throng of well-wishers and curious strangers. Outside the cathedral, a line of black SUVs idled, engines running. Lorenzo's men, whom she had already learned to identify by their identical dark suits and cold gazes, formed a protective barrier around the newlyweds. One of them, a tall man with graying temples, opened the door of the lead vehicle. "After you, Mrs. Moretti," Lorenzo murmured, his hand resting on the small of her back. Mrs. Moretti. The name felt foreign on her tongue, like a language she had yet to learn. Sophia slid into the leather seat, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. Lorenzo settled beside her, and instantly the atmosphere in the car crackled with an electric charge. As the convoy pulled away from the cathedral, Sophia finally found her voice. "Where are we going?" "Home," Lorenzo replied without glancing at her, already engrossed in messages on his phone, his attention seemingly fixed on business rather than his new bride. "I need to see my mother." "The reception has been canceled." His tone brooked no argument. "Your mother is being moved to a private facility as we speak. The best doctors, the best care. She'll want for nothing." Sophia's chest tightened. "You can't just—" Lorenzo finally met her gaze, and the sheer intensity in his eyes extinguished her words. "I can do whatever I want, Sophia. You do well to remember that." The remainder of the drive passed in silence. Sophia stared out the window, watching Chicago blur past, familiar streets morphing into foreign territory as they ventured deeper into the affluent parts of the city. Everything was happening too quickly. This morning, she had been Sophia Chen, a broke college dropout working double shifts to cover her mother's medical bills. Now, she was Sophia Moretti, wife to one of Illinois' most dangerous men. The car finally stopped before a massive wrought iron gate. Beyond it, Sophia glimpsed a mansion worthy of a magazine coverall stone and glass, imbued with old-world elegance. The gate swung open automatically, and they drove up a circular driveway lined with meticulously manicured hedges. Lorenzo exited first, then offered Sophia his hand. Her fingers looked small and pale against his as he assisted her from the car. The wedding dress made walking cumbersome, but she managed the front steps without stumbling. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing an elegant foyer with gleaming marble floors and a chandelier that likely cost more than most people's homes. Several staff members awaited inside, a housekeeper, a butler, and others whose roles Sophia couldn't immediately discern. "Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti," the housekeeper said, with a warm, seemingly genuine smile. But Sophia barely registered her words. Her focus was entirely on Lorenzo, who had moved to stand directly in front of her. This close, she could discern flecks of gold in his dark eyes and feel the heat radiating from his body. He reached up and gently removed the veil from her hair, his fingers barely grazing her skin. Then he leaned down, his lips brushing her ear as he spoke in a voice so low only she could hear. "From this moment on, you belong to me. No one will touch you unless they want to die." The words sent a chill through Sophia's veins, yet there was something else in his tone, something protective rather than purely threatening. Still, as she looked up into his dark eyes, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that she had just signed her own death warrant. She was Lorenzo Moretti's wife now, and she had absolutely no idea what that truly implied. Sophia awoke in a bed vast enough for 4 people. For a fleeting moment, she had no recollection of her whereabouts. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, softer than anything she had ever touched, and the room carried the faint, sweet scent of jasmine. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating what appeared to be a palatial bedroom. Then, reality crashed back. The wedding, the vows, Lorenzo's dark promise whispered in her ear. She sat up abruptly, still clad in the silk nightgown someone had laid out for her the previous night. Her wedding dress was gone, replaced by a wardrobe that certainly hadn't belonged to her yesterday. The walk-in closet was filled with designer clothes in her exact size, each item still bearing price tags that made her stomach clench. A single dress cost more than she used to earn in 3 months. The bedroom door was solid mahogany with brass fixtures that seemed more fitting for a museum. Sophia turned the handle, half expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. She stepped into a hallway stretching in both directions, adorned with oil paintings and antique furniture that unequivocally declared old money. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," Sophia gasped, her heart pounding. A man in a black suit stood at the far end of the hallway, hands clasped behind his back. He looked as if he could effortlessly bench press a car. "I'm Marcus," he continued with a polite nod. "I'll be escorting you wherever you need to go today." "Escorting me?" Sophia's voice came out smaller than she intended. "For your safety, ma'am. Mr. Moretti's orders." Sophia forced a smile. "That's very thoughtful, but I don't need an escort to walk around the house." Marcus remained unmoving. "I'm afraid I have strict instructions, ma'am." The word instructions hung in the air, a thinly veiled threat beneath a polished veneer. Sophia's pleasant expression vanished as the stark reality of her predicament began to solidify. This was no friendly welcome, it was an elaborate watch. She spent the morning exploring the sprawling mansion, Marcus following her every move. A well-dressed shadow, precisely 6 feet behind her. The sheer scale of the place was astounding. 14 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library that could rival many university collections, and a kitchen equipped to cater a grand wedding. Each room was impeccably decorated, flawlessly maintained, yet eerily devoid of any personal touches suggesting actual habitation. It wasn't until she attempted to step out onto the expansive back terrace that Marcus finally broke his silence. "I apologize, Mrs. Moretti, but you'll require Mr. Moretti's explicit permission before venturing outside." Sophia spun around, her gaze fixed on him. Permission to simply step onto a patio? "The grounds are not secure during daylight hours. It's for your protection." Protection from what? She wondered aloud. Marcus's composure remained unbroken. "I am not authorized to discuss security matters, ma'am." Frustration welled within Sophia, a seething kettle about to boil over. She wasn't an honored guest. She was a captive, a meticulously presented, comfortably incarcerated prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. That afternoon, she tried to call her mother, only to find the bedroom phone utterly silent. When she inquired about it, Marcus promptly produced a cell phone. "Mr. Moretti had this arranged for you. It contains all the necessary numbers." Sophia scrolled through the contacts, precisely 4 entries. Lorenzo, the house staff, her mother's new medical facility, and a generic emergency. Her old phone, with all her friends' numbers, was conspicuously absent. Calling the medical facility connected her to a cheerful nurse who assured her of her mother's excellent health and comprehensive care. However, when Sophia requested to speak with her directly, she was informed that visiting hours were strictly regulated, necessitating an appointment. An appointment to see her own mother? By evening, Sophia felt on the verge of exploding. As Lorenzo finally came through the front door, exuding an air of ownership over the entire world, which, she grudgingly admitted, he probably did, she awaited him in the foyer. "We need to talk," she declared, before he could even shed his jacket. Lorenzo's eyes lingered on her for a long moment, taking in her defiant posture and flushed cheeks. "Dinner first." Then something flickered in his gaze, a hint of surprise, perhaps, that she dared to challenge him. He gave a single nod and led her into a study, a room adorned with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive throne-like desk. "I can't leave the house," Sophia began, struggling to keep her voice level. "I can't see my mother. I can't even make a phone call without someone eavesdropping. This isn't a marriage, it's a prison sentence." Lorenzo, unhurried, poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "You're right, it's not a marriage." His casual agreement caught her off guard. "Then what is it?" He turned to face her, and the raw intensity of his stare involuntarily made her recoil. "It's survival, Sophia. You don't comprehend the peril you're in. This isn't a marriage. It's the only thing preserving your life." Danger from whom? What was he implying? "That's not your concern." "Not my concern?" Sophia's voice escalated. "You've turned me into a prisoner, and you say it's not my concern?" Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You're not a prisoner. You're protected. There's a fundamental difference." "I fail to see one." For a fleeting instant, something stark flashed across his features. Frustration, perhaps even pain, but it vanished so quickly Sophia might have imagined it. "Then you're not looking diligently enough," he said quietly. "Trust me, Sophia, please." The please startled her. It sounded genuine, almost vulnerable, but before she could react, the study door creaked open, revealing the gray-haired man from the wedding. "Boss, we need to—" He stopped abruptly upon seeing Sophia, his expression immediately guarded. "Sorry, didn't realize you had company." "It's fine, Vincent. What is it?" Vincent glanced at Sophia, then back at Lorenzo. "The Rossi family is inquiring about the wedding." About her. Sophia felt as though she'd been doused with ice water. She was an object, her, not even worthy of a name. "Let them inquire," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously calm. "With respect, boss," Vincent began, "taking a wife. It's not typical for you. It makes you appear." Vincent hesitated. "Weak?" Lorenzo finished. Vincent nodded reluctantly. "They perceive her as your soft spot, your vulnerability." Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. She was his weakness, a liability, a tool his enemies could exploit against him. No wonder he kept her sequestered like a shameful secret. "Get out," Lorenzo said softly, but with an underlying current of steel. Vincent swiftly exited, closing the door behind him. Lorenzo turned back to Sophia, but she was already moving towards the door. "Sophia, wait. Don't." She spun around, a tempest of anger and hurt raging within her. "I finally understand. I'm not your wife. I'm your weakness, something to be hidden away and guarded, because if anything happens to me, it makes you look bad. That's not... I want to see my mother tomorrow, and I want my own phone back, and I want to be able to walk outside without asking permission like a child." Lorenzo stared at her for a prolonged moment. "No." The single word struck her with the force of a physical blow. "No, not tomorrow, not until I know it's safe." Sophia felt something irrevocably shatter within her. "Then I suppose we understand each other perfectly." She strode out of the study and up the stairs, ignoring his voice calling her name. Reaching her bedroom, her beautiful, luxurious cage, she locked the door and collapsed onto the bed. Lorenzo Moretti might have married her, but he desired no wife. He wanted a possession, something to be kept locked away and protected, because losing it would tarnish his reputation. Well, she refused to be anyone's weakness. If he intended to play the part of the cruel captor, she would play the part of the prisoner meticulously planning her escape. Sophia spent the next 2 days in silent defiance. She responded to Lorenzo's questions with monosyllables, ate her meals without glancing at him, and spent hours staring out her bedroom window, meticulously devising escape routes. The mansion's security was formidable, but not impenetrable. She had begun to notice patterns in the guards' rotations, subtle vulnerabilities in their coverage. What she desperately needed was an opportunity. On Thursday evening, that opportunity seemed to materialize in the most unexpected manner. Sophia had just finished a long, luxurious bath, one of the few genuine pleasures in her opulent confinement, when she noticed something white on the marble floor near her bedroom door. A piece of paper, folded small and thin enough to have been slipped under the heavy wooden barrier. Her heart quickened as she retrieved it. The staff wouldn't communicate this way. Lorenzo certainly wouldn't. This meant someone had bypassed security, eluded the guards, and circumvented all of Lorenzo's meticulously constructed defenses. Someone wanted to help her. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the paper. The message was concise, scrawled in neat block letters that offered no clue to the sender's identity. "You don't belong to him. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Sophia sank onto the edge of her bed, rereading the ominous words. Someone knew she was trapped here. Someone was offering her a path to freedom. The note didn't specify how or when, but the implication was stark. There were watchful eyes, individuals capable of assisting her escape from Lorenzo's grasp. For the first time in days, a fragile bud of hope bloomed within Sophia's chest. She concealed the note within a book in the bedroom's small library and attempted to appear normal during dinner. Lorenzo was unusually quiet, his attention frequently drawn to his phone. He repeatedly glanced towards the windows, his jaw clenched with tension. "Everything all right?" Sophia inquired, surprising herself by breaking her silent treatment. Lorenzo's dark eyes fixed on her with laser-like intensity. "Why do you ask? You seem on edge." He scrutinized her face for a long moment, as if searching for some hidden meaning in her words. Business matters. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. The dismissal stung, reinforcing Sophia's conclusions about her role in his life. She was a possession to be protected and ignored, not a partner to be privy to information. After dinner, Sophia retreated to her bedroom and waited. If someone was going to facilitate her escape, it would likely happen at night, when security might be less stringent. She changed into dark clothing jeans and a black sweater from her mysteriously well-stocked wardrobe and sat by the window, observing the grounds. The mansion's exterior was illuminated by strategically placed spotlights, carving out bright areas interspersed with deep shadows. Sophia could discern at least 3 guards patrolling the visible zones, but she knew there had to be many more concealed from view. At 11:47 p.m., the tranquil night shattered. The sharp crack of a gunshot ripped through the silence. Sophia instinctively dropped to the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. Shouting erupted from somewhere outside, followed by the sound of running feet and barking dogs. More shots ensued, rapid bursts that illuminated the darkness like deadly fireworks. Her bedroom door burst open without warning. Lorenzo filled the doorway, his typically immaculate appearance disheveled. His shirt was untucked, his hair disarrayed, and a wild look she'd never witnessed before gleamed in his eyes. "Get away from the window," he commanded, striding across the room. Sophia scrambled backward. "What's happening?" Instead of answering, Lorenzo seized her arm and pulled her towards the walk-in closet. "In here, now. I'm not hiding in a closet. You are, if I say you are." His voice sliced through her protest like a blade. Without ceremony, he shoved her into the closet and slammed the door shut. Sophia pounded on the wood. "Lorenzo, let me out." "Stay there until I come back." His voice carried through the door. "Don't open this door for anyone but me. Anyone? Sophia, do you understand?" No, she didn't understand anything. However, her pleas vanished into the empty air. His footsteps receded swiftly across the bedroom floor. Sophia pressed her ear against the door, strained to hear. The gunfire had ceased, yet she still discerned hushed, urgent voices exchanging sharp commands. Whatever was unfolding, it bore significant weight. 20 minutes stretched into an eternity, feeling like 20 hours. When Lorenzo finally reappeared, Sophia was huddled within the closet's corner, enveloped by designer garments faintly scented with his cologne. "It's over," he stated simply, opening the door. Sophia emerged, her legs trembling. What was over? What transpired? Someone attempted to breach the perimeter. They're gone now. The nonchalant manner in which he delivered the news, as if discussing mundane weather, sent a chill down Sophia's spine. "Gone? Do you mean—" "I mean, they won't be making another attempt." Sophia fixed her gaze on him, observing the rigid set of his jaw, the cold contentment in his eyes. This was the man known as the Ghost, the very reason individuals vanished. "Who are they?" she whispered. "No one you need to concern yourself with." The dismissal was automatic, yet Lorenzo seemed to catch himself, his expression softening slightly. "Sophia, there's something crucial you must comprehend. There are individuals who wish to harm you, not because of any transgression on your part, but because inflicting pain upon you inflicts pain upon me." So Vincent's assessment was accurate. "I am your Achilles heel." Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You're not my weakness. You're—" He stopped, exasperated. "It's complicated." "Then elucidate it for me." "I cannot." The words seemed to exact a toll. "Not yet. Just trust me, please." But Sophia found herself unable to trust him. Not when he confined her as if she were a shameful secret. Not when he steadfastly refused to offer any explanations. And especially not when bullets were riddling the house because of her presence. "I want to leave," she stated softly. Lorenzo became utterly still. "What?" "I want to go stay with friends, or find my own place, somewhere secure, far from all of this." "No." The blunt refusal ignited Sophia's temper. "You can't imprison me here indefinitely. Observe me." To underscore his declaration, Lorenzo walked to the bedroom door and spoke to someone in the hallway. Upon his return, his expression was grim but resolute. "Security is being trebled. No one will enter or exit without my personal authorization. The grounds are now under complete lockdown." Sophia felt the metaphorical walls closing in around her. The enigmatic note had promised liberation, yet instead, she found herself more ensnared than ever. "Lorenzo, please." "This discussion is concluded." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Sophia, if anyone approaches you, anyone at all, you are to inform me immediately, irrespective of what they say, irrespective of what promises they make. Do you comprehend?" Sophia nodded, solely because she recognized the futility of further argument. As soon as Lorenzo departed, she retrieved the note from its hiding place and reread it. "Leave now, or you'll regret it." The warning felt more prescient than ever. Someone out there understood her predicament and had managed to get close enough to tuck a note under her door. Despite all of Lorenzo's security measures, the gunfire tonight unequivocally demonstrated that Lorenzo's adversaries were real and dangerous. But it also proved another crucial point. If his enemies could infiltrate the mansion to such an extent, perhaps her potential rescuers could as well. Sophia carefully folded the note and slipped it into her pocket. Tomorrow, she would devise a means to signal her readiness to accept aid. Because after tonight, one truth was vividly clear. Lorenzo Moretti would never release her willingly. If she yearned for freedom, she would have to claim it herself. The whispers began 3 days after the shooting incident. Sophia first caught wind of them from Maria, the housekeeper, who was engaged in animated rapid-fire Spanish on her phone as Sophia entered the kitchen seeking coffee. The moment Maria sighted her, she fell silent and terminated the call, but not before Sophia discerned a few words. Esposa, debilidad, peligroso. Wife, weakness, dangerous. It required little insight to grasp the prevailing sentiment regarding Lorenzo's sudden marriage. By afternoon, even the security guards seemed altered. Sophia observed the way they now regarded her, no longer with the deferential distance they had previously maintained, but with something akin to pity. She was the boss's vulnerability, the chink in his armor visible to all but him. When Lorenzo returned home that evening, his demeanor was darker than she had ever witnessed. He spoke barely a word during dinner, spending the majority of the meal absorbed in his phone. His jaw clenched so tightly Sophia wondered if his teeth might fracture. "Problems at work," she ventured, attempting conversation. Lorenzo's eyes snapped to hers with an intensity that made her regret her inquiry. "Nothing that concerns you?" There it was again, the casual dismissal that starkly reminded Sophia of her standing in his priorities. She was about to retreat into silence when Lorenzo's phone buzzed with a message that rendered his expression murderous. "Get dressed," he commanded abruptly, rising from the table. "Something formal. We're going out." "Out." Sophia's heart quickened. This marked the first instance he had mentioned taking her anywhere. "Where?" "Dinner with some business associates." The way he articulated business associates sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. However, she was not about to squander an opportunity to leave the mansion. Perhaps this was her chance to signal for assistance, to establish contact with whoever had sent that note. An hour later, Sophia found herself nestled in the back of Lorenzo's armored SUV, clad in a midnight blue gown that likely surpassed the cost of many automobiles. Lorenzo sat beside her, impeccably tailored in a black suit, embodying every facet of the dangerous man depicted by the media. "Listen to me meticulously," he instructed as they approached an elegant downtown restaurant. "Tonight, you remain by my side. You engage in conversation only with individuals to whom I introduce you, and if anything feels amiss, anything whatsoever, you are to notify me immediately." Sophia nodded, her stomach churning with a mix of apprehension and anticipation. This was precisely the sort of public venue where her enigmatic allies might make contact. The establishment had been cleared of regular patrons, leaving only men in exorbitant suits and women who appeared plucked from the pages of fashion magazines. Sophia recognized several faces from newspaper photographs, the kind of individuals who frequented both the business section and the crime blotter with equal regularity. Lorenzo's hand settled possessively on the small of her back as he guided her through the throng. She could feel eyes tracking their movement. Hear whispered conversations that abruptly ceased as they drew near. Everyone was discussing them, discussing her. "Lorenzo," a smooth voice called out. A man in his 50s approached, his smile sharp as a razor. "Congratulations on the wedding, such a surprising development." "Thank you, Sal." Lorenzo replied, his voice meticulously neutral. Sophia, this is Salvador Rossi, Sal, my wife. Rossi. Sophia had encountered that name before, uttered by the staff in tones usually reserved for catastrophic events, the rival family Vincent had alluded to. Sal's gaze roamed over Sophia in a manner that made her skin crawl. Charming, absolutely charming. You're a fortunate man, Lorenzo, though I must confess, none of us foresaw this. Marriage isn't precisely your modus operandi. People change, Lorenzo stated quietly. Yet Sophia could sense the tension radiating from him. Indeed, they do. Sal's smile broadened. It renders a man vulnerable in ways he never anticipated. The word vulnerable lingered in the air like a veiled threat. Lorenzo's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Sophia's back. Dinner was served at an elongated table capable of accommodating a small army. Sophia found herself seated between Lorenzo and an elderly woman who dedicated most of the meal to expounding on her grandson's accomplishments in law school. It should have been tedious, but Sophia was too preoccupied with the undercurrents of tension circulating the table to engage in pleasantries. She noted the persistent glances directed their way by the men, how conversations faltered upon their proximity, how Salvador Rossi observed them both with a predatory keenness from across the table. It was during the third course that Sophia overheard it. She had excused herself to use the restroom, but as she passed a small, secluded alcove near the back of the restaurant, voices made her pause. Two men were conversing in hushed tones, believing themselves to be alone. He never should have married her. Makes him soft. That's precisely why he did it, though. Moretti isn't foolish. He knows we've been searching for an opening, and now we have one. If we take her, we bring him down. Simple as that. Sophia's blood turned to ice water. They were discussing her abduction, her use as a means to destroy Lorenzo. Soon. Rossi already has people in place. A few more days to allow Moretti to grow complacent. Then, footsteps interrupted their conversation. Sophia swiftly ducked around the corner, her heart pounding so fiercely she was certain everyone in the restaurant could perceive it. When she finally returned to the table, Lorenzo took one look at her face and leaned close. "What's wrong?" His voice was barely a whisper. Sophia glanced around the table, acutely aware of Salvador Rossi's scrutinizing gaze, of the other faces that had previously seemed merely curious, but now felt menacing. "Nothing," she lied. "I'm fine." But Lorenzo wasn't convinced. His hand found hers beneath the table, his fingers intertwining with hers in a grip that was simultaneously gentle and possessive. For a fleeting moment, his carefully maintained composure faltered, and Sophia glimpsed something fierce and protective in his dark eyes. "Tell me," he insisted softly. But before Sophia could respond, Salvador Rossi raised his wine glass in a toast that plunged the entire table into silence. "To new beginnings," he declared, his eyes fixed directly on Sophia, "and to the interesting times ahead." The toast resonated like a declaration of war. Lorenzo's grip on Sophia's hand tightened until it was almost painful, and she realized with growing dread that he understood precisely what Salvador implied. This was not merely a dinner, it was a potent display of dominance. The rival families signaled their intent, highlighting Lorenzo's vulnerability and their readiness to exploit it. Sophia observed the tension etched into Lorenzo's jawline and the carefully concealed fury in his gaze. Yet, rather than seeing a man determined to safeguard his loved ones, she perceived only a man enraged by his adversary's discovery of his weak spot. She was, unmistakably, his Achilles' heel, and he bristled with resentment because of it. As the evening progressed, Lorenzo's mood steadily darkened. He offered terse responses to questions and cast menacing glances at anyone who lingered their gaze upon Sophia. By the time they departed the restaurant, Sophia was convinced Lorenzo regretted their marriage. The silence in the car on the journey home was oppressive. "I'm sorry," Sophia finally uttered. Lorenzo turned, his expression unreadable. "For what?" "For making you appear weak, for being a burden." A flicker of anguish crossed Lorenzo's face. "Sophia, it's all right. I understand now. This marriage was a mistake." Lorenzo fixed his gaze on her for an extended moment before looking away. "Perhaps it was." The word struck Sophia with the force of a physical blow. So that was it. He regretted everything. What Lorenzo remained oblivious to was Sophia's prior encounter with Salvador's threat. She was aware of the impending danger, and perhaps, with enough cunning, she could manipulate the rival family's schemes to her advantage. If their objective was to leverage her to dismantle Lorenzo, she might just allow them, finally securing the freedom she so desperately craved. 3 days following the dinner, Sophia had reached her breaking point. She had spent 72 hours replaying every detail of that evening. Salvador Rossi's predatory smirk, the overheard plot to abduct her, Lorenzo's confession that their union was an error. Each memory felt like another nail sealing the coffin of her hopes. The final straw came on Tuesday morning when her attempt to call her mother led to the discovery that her phone had been disconnected overnight. Mr. Moretti deemed it a security risk, Marcus explained when Sophia demanded an explanation. All communication is being monitored for your safety. My safety, Sophia repeated, her voice eerily calm. True to form, she spent the day pacing her opulent prison, her anger intensifying like pressure in a steam engine. By the time Lorenzo returned home that evening, Sophia was poised to erupt. She found him in his study, seated behind his imposing desk like a monarch on a throne, scrutinizing documents that likely determined people's destinies with a mere flick of his pen. He glanced up as she entered, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of tenderness softened his dark eyes. Sophia. How was your— Don't, Sophia interjected, closing the door behind her with unnecessary force. Just don't pretend you care about my day. Lorenzo deliberately placed his pen down. What's wrong? What's wrong? Sophia scoffed, though the sound held no amusement. You confiscated my phone. You forbid me from seeing my mother. You parade me around like some trophy, then act as if you're ashamed of me. And you ask what's wrong? I'm protecting you. Stop lying. The words erupted from her, unleashing all the pent-up fury she had been suppressing. Stop pretending this is about protection. You married me out of necessity because of some business transaction or debt or whatever depraved arrangement you made, and now you're saddled with me and you despise it. Lorenzo rose, his chair scraping against the floor. That's not true. Is it? Sophia advanced towards the desk, her hands trembling with rage. You can't bear to look at me. You won't touch me unless it's for show. You keep me sequestered like some dirty secret because I humiliate you, because I make you look weak. Sophia, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. She slammed her palm onto the desk, and Lorenzo flinched as if she had struck him. Tell me why you ruined my life. Tell me why you forced me into this marriage. Tell me why I should endure another day in this gilded cage you've constructed. For a moment, the only sound in the room was Sophia's ragged breathing. Lorenzo stared at her, his face a canvas of emotions she had never witnessed before. Pain, frustration, something that bordered on desperation. You want the truth? His voice was rougher than she had ever heard it. The truth is, I've been in love with you since I was 15 years old. Sophia's mouth fell open. Whatever she had anticipated, it wasn't that. You don't remember me, Lorenzo continued, moving around the desk towards her. Why would you? I was nobody then, just some punk kid from the wrong side of town. But I remember you, Sophia Chen, the girl who volunteered at the community center, who helped old Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries, who smiled at everyone like they mattered. Lorenzo, I used to watch you from across the street, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. I used to dream about talking to you, about being worthy of someone like you. But I wasn't. I was already too immersed in my father's world, already tainted by things that would have appalled you. Sophia felt the ground shift beneath her. That doesn't explain— I've been protecting you for 10 years, Lorenzo stated, his control finally shattering completely. When your mother fell ill, who do you think ensured she saw the best doctor? When those loan sharks began to circle, who do you think kept them from harming you? When Salvador Rossi's men began inquiring about the pretty girl who worked at the diner, who do you think made sure they stayed away? You. The words struck Sophia like physical blows. What? Every threat, every danger, every monster that has attempted to touch you, I have stood between you and them. For 10 years, Sophia. 10 years of watching from the shadows, of keeping you safe without you ever knowing I existed. Sophia's anger crumbled, replaced by confusion and a dangerously budding sense of hope. Then why didn't you— Because you deserved better. Lorenzo's voice broke on the words. You deserve someone pure, someone good, someone who could offer you the life you desired, not someone like me. Then why marry me? Why now? Lorenzo's laughter was bitter. Because they were closing in. Salvador's family, other rivals. They had realized that you mattered to me. The only way to keep you safe was to make you untouchable. My wife, under my official protection. Sophia stared at him, her mind reeling. Everything she had believed was false. The cold detachment wasn't rejection, it was restraint. The protection wasn't imprisonment, it was love. You think I'm your enemy? Lorenzo continued, his voice raw with emotion. Every day I battle monsters so you never have to witness them. Every day I become more of a monster myself so that you can remain innocent, remain pure, remain... The lights extinguished. For a heartbeat, the study was plunged into absolute darkness. Then emergency lighting flickered on, casting an eerie red glow over everything. Get down! Lorenzo roared, lunging across the space between them, just as the study windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Lorenzo's body covered Sophia's as they hit the floor, his arms encircling her head to shield her from the debris. The sound was deafening. Automatic weapons, shouting voices, the crashing of furniture being destroyed. Stay down! Lorenzo growled in her ear. Don't move, don't make a sound. But Sophia was too stunned to move anyway. Even as bullets whizzed over their heads, even as pandemonium erupted around them, all she could contemplate was Lorenzo's recent confession. He had been protecting her for 10 years. He had loved her since they were teenagers. Everything, the marriage, the security, the distance, had been about ensuring her safety. And she had been planning to betray him to his enemies. As if sensing her thoughts, Lorenzo lifted his head just enough to look at her in the red emergency light. This is what I've been protecting you from, he said, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. This is why I can't let you go. Sophia met his eyes and finally saw the truth. Not the cold mafia boss the world feared, but a man who had spent 10 years of his life loving her from the shadows, fighting battles she had never even known existed. Lorenzo, she whispered. But before she could utter anything further, an explosion rocked the mansion. And everything went black. Sophia awoke in the mansion's medical room, her head throbbing and her ears still ringing from the explosion. Sunlight streamed through bulletproof windows, and she could hear men's voices in the hallway, sharp, urgent commands about security sweeps and perimeter checks. The attack had lasted 3 hours. 6 of Lorenzo's men had been injured, but no one had died. The attackers had retreated when reinforcements arrived, leaving behind a clear message. They could reach her any time they wanted. You're awake! Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, looking as if he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was torn, a bandage adorned his left arm, and exhaustion etched lines onto his face. But his eyes held a tenderness that made Sophia's chest ache. Are you hurt? He asked, crossing to her bedside. Sophia shook her head, though the movement made her dizzy. Lorenzo, about what you said earlier. We don't have to talk about it. His voice was careful, controlled. The vulnerable man who had confessed his love was gone, replaced by the cautious stranger she had married. You were upset? I shouldn't have. No, Sophia struggled to sit up. You should have. I needed to hear it. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment, searching her face. Sophia! Mr. Moretti! Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We need you downstairs, the security briefing. 5 minutes, Lorenzo said, without taking his eyes off Sophia. Sir, I can't wait. There's been a development with the Rossi situation. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Stay here, he instructed Sophia. Don't leave this room until I return. After he left, Sophia lay staring at the ceiling, replaying everything Lorenzo had revealed. 10 years of protection, 10 years of love from the shadows. How many dangers had she unknowingly navigated? How many threats had he neutralized before they even reached her? Lost in contemplation, she didn't perceive the figure in the doorway until a familiar voice broke the silence. My beautiful girl. Sophia's head snapped up. It was Mom. Helen Chin stood framed in the doorway, relying heavily on a walker, yet appearing more robust than Sophia had witnessed in months. Her mother's eyes were lucid, her complexion healthier, and she wore a new dress that fit impeccably. How did you get here? Sophia sprang from the bed. The security? I informed them I was your mother and needed to see you after the attack. Helen's smile was tinged with sorrow. It's astonishing how quickly doors open when Lorenzo Moretti's name is mentioned. Sophia embraced her mother cautiously, mindful of her frailty. Are you all right? The treatment center is wonderful. A private room, excellent doctors, nurses who speak Mandarin. Helen pulled back to examine Sophia's face. He's taken very good care of me, your husband. Something in her mother's tone sent a chill down Sophia's spine. Mom. Helen moved slowly to the window, gazing out at the mansion grounds. You know, I always wondered when you'd figure it out. Figure what out? That Lorenzo Moretti has been in love with you since high school. The word struck Sophia with the force of a physical blow. You knew? Helen turned to face her daughter, and Sophia saw tears glistening in her mother's eyes. Baby, who do you think paid for my cancer treatments? Sophia's world tilted precariously. What? The debt to the loan sharks? That was real. But Lorenzo paid it off 2 years ago. He's been covering my medical expenses ever since. Helen's voice wavered. The private facility, the experimental treatments, the specialists who fly in from New York, all of it. I haven't owed anyone money in 2 years. Sophia sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. That's impossible. He said the debt was his excuse to finally claim you. Helen sat on the edge of the medical bed. Sophia, that boy has been protecting us since your father died. Anonymous payments when we couldn't make rent. My hospital bills mysteriously getting clerical errors that reduced them to nothing. The scholarship that sent you to college, that was a need-based aid, sweetheart. No, Sophia shook her head violently. No, that can't be true. The night you met him at the loan shark's office, that was theater. Lorenzo had already bought the debt. He was just looking for a reason to marry you that wouldn't send you running. Sophia felt as if she were drowning. Every memory, every assumption, every conclusion she'd drawn was crumbling. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd refuse his help if you knew it was charity. And because, Helen's voice dropped to a whisper, because I was dying. Sophia, the doctors gave me 6 months, but Lorenzo's doctors, his treatments, they've given me years. The room spun around Sophia as the full magnitude of Lorenzo's deception. No, his devotion became clear. He hadn't forced her into marriage to pay a debt she owed. He'd created the illusion of a debt to justify a marriage, because he loved her, because he'd always loved her. He could have just told me, Sophia whispered. And what would you have said? Would you have married him if you knew he was a mobster? Would you have let him into your life if you knew the things he's done? Sophia didn't answer because she already knew the truth. She would have run. She would have refused his help and let her mother die rather than accept anything from a man like Lorenzo Moretti. So he'd found another way, a way that made her believe she had no choice, when in reality, he'd been giving her everything. I have to tell him, Sophia said, standing abruptly. I have to. The lights went out again. This time, there was no gunfire, no explosions, just darkness, and the rhythmic thud of Sophia's own heartbeat. Emergency lighting flickered on, but it was different from the attack. Planned, controlled. Mom? Sophia reached for her mother, but Helen was backing toward the medical room's panic button. That's not the mansion's emergency system, Helen said, her voice tight with fear. The door burst open, but it wasn't Lorenzo or his men. 3 strangers in black tactical gear filled the doorway, their faces covered, weapons drawn. Sophia Moretti, the lead man stated. You're coming with us. No. Helen stepped protectively in front of her daughter. Leave her alone. The man barely glanced at Helen before nodding to his companions. One of them seized Sophia's arms while another pressed a cloth over her nose and mouth. The chemical scent was overpowering, sweet and cloying, and wrong. Mom. Sophia fought against the restraints, but her vision was already blurring. Mom, tell Lorenzo. Tell him what you should have told him yourself, Helen cried, tears streaming down her face as Sophia's world went dark. Tell him you love him too. The last thing Sophia saw before unconsciousness claimed her was her mother's face, and the last thing she heard was Helen's voice screaming for Lorenzo. When Sophia awoke, she was no longer in the mansion. She was no longer safe. And Lorenzo, the man who'd spent 10 years protecting her, who'd built his entire world around keeping her safe, had no idea where she was. But for the first time since their wedding day, Sophia knew exactly who Lorenzo Moretti really was, and she knew that he would move heaven and earth to find her. The question was, would it be enough? Lorenzo found Helen collapsed in the medical room, sobbing into her hands. "They took her," she whispered when she saw him. "3 men, they took my baby." The sound that came from Lorenzo's throat wasn't entirely human. Vincent had never seen his boss break before, had never seen the careful control shatter so completely. Lorenzo punched the wall hard enough to leave a crater in the drywall, his knuckles splitting and bleeding. "How long?" Lorenzo's voice was deadly quiet. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Lorenzo was already moving, pulling out his phone. "Vincent, mobilize everyone. Every soldier, every contact, every favor we're owed. I want the city turned inside out." "Boss, everything?" Lorenzo snarled. "Burn it all down if you have to find her." What followed was 12 hours of systematic warfare. Lorenzo Moretti disappeared, replaced by something darker, something that reminded people why they'd learned to fear his name. He moved through Chicago's underworld like an avenging angel, leaving destruction in his wake. 3 rival safe houses went up in flames. 2 enemy lieutenants simply vanished. A judge who'd been taking Rossi's money found photos of his corruption delivered to the FBI. The message was clear: give me back my wife or watch your world burn. By dawn, Lorenzo had a location. The abandoned warehouse on the south side looked like every other derelict building in the district, but Lorenzo's sources had been thorough. Thermal imaging showed at least 8 heat signatures inside. One of them was smaller than the rest, isolated in what looked like a separate room. "Sophia, this is suicide," Vincent muttered as they surveyed the building. "We should wait for backup. Come at this smart." "She's been in there for 12 hours, Lorenzo said quietly. "I'm done waiting." He checked his weapon one final time, his movements calm and methodical, despite the rage burning in his eyes. "If I don't make it out, you will. If I don't—" Lorenzo continued. "Make sure her mother is taken care of. Make sure Sophia knows." He paused, struggling with words that had never come easily. "Make sure she knows I loved her enough to die for her." Then he was moving, a shadow in the pre-dawn darkness. The first guard never saw him coming. Neither did the second. Lorenzo moved through the warehouse like death itself, silent and efficient. These weren't Lorenzo's usual clean eliminations. These were personal, brutal, final. By the time he reached the central room, 5 men were dead, and Salvador Rossi was waiting for him. Sophia was tied to a chair in the center of the room, duct tape over her mouth, terror in her eyes. But she was alive, conscious, fighting against her restraints with a fury that made Lorenzo's chest tight with pride and fear. "The ghost appears," Salvador said with a smile that was all teeth. "Right on schedule." Lorenzo's gun was trained on Salvador's head, but the older man seemed unconcerned. He had his own weapon pressed against Sophia's temple, his finger resting on the trigger. "Drop it, Lorenzo. Unless you want to watch your weakness die." "She's not my weakness." Lorenzo's voice was steady, deadly calm. The words carried through the warehouse like a verdict. "She's my queen, and anyone who touches her dies." Salvador laughed. "Your queen? She's a nobody, Lorenzo. A broke little waitress who got lucky. You think she loves you? You think she chose you? She's here because you forced her. I'm here because I love him." The words came from Sophia, muffled by the tape, but clear enough to silence the room. She'd managed to work one edge of the duct tape loose, her voice raw but determined. "I love him," she repeated, her eyes locked on Lorenzo's. "And he loves me, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Every day for 10 years, he chose to protect me, to care for me, to love me from the shadows, because he thought I deserved better than him." Salvador's confident smile faltered. "You're lying. You married him for money." I married him because my mother was dying and I was desperate," Sophia said. "But I'm staying with him because he's the best man I've ever known. He's kind when no one's watching. He's gentle when he thinks I'm sleeping. He fights monsters so I never have to see them." Lorenzo felt something break open in his chest. After everything, the kidnapping, the terror, the gun to her head, she was defending him. She was choosing him. "Touching," Salvador sneered, but his hand was shaking now. "Too bad you'll both die for—" Lorenzo moved. The gunshot, though deafening in the confined space, did not originate from Salvador. Lorenzo's projectile found its mark in the man's chest, the force of the impact spinning him away from Sophia. Salvador's own shot veered off target, embedding itself in concrete rather than flesh. However, Lorenzo's actions were far from concluded. As Salvador collapsed, gasping for breath, Lorenzo stood over him, his demeanor radiating the cold fury of a man who had finally discovered something worth sacrificing for. "You threatened my wife," Lorenzo articulated quietly. "You laid hands on what is mine. You instilled fear in her." Salvador attempted to speak, to retrieve his weapon once more, but Lorenzo's boot swiftly crushed his wrist. The firearm skittered across the floor. "She isn't my vulnerability," Lorenzo reiterated, his voice imbued with absolute conviction. "She is my strength. She is my purpose. She is my everything." The final shot was an execution, delivered with professional precision and finality. Subsequently, Lorenzo meticulously severed Sophia's restraints, removing the tape from her mouth with gentle hands that trembled despite his efforts to maintain composure. "Are you injured?" he inquired, his voice faltering. "Did they—" "I'm all right," Sophia whispered, encircling his neck with her arms. "I'm all right. You found me." Lorenzo embraced her as if she might vanish, his face buried in her hair. "I apologize. I am so profoundly sorry I allowed this to happen. I vowed to protect you, and I failed." "You didn't fail." Sophia drew back to gaze at him, her hands framing his face. "You saved me. You have always saved me." Lorenzo stared at her intently. This woman, who had witnessed his act of killing, who had observed him transform into the monster the world believed him to be, yet consistently regarded him as someone worthy of redemption. "I love you," he confessed, the words hanging between them like both an admission and a solemn pledge. "I have loved you since our childhood. I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Sophia whispered. "I choose you, Lorenzo, not out of obligation, but because I desire to." He then kissed her, enveloped by the destruction he had wrought to ensure her safety. And Sophia reciprocated the kiss with all the dormant passion she had been too apprehensive to acknowledge. When they eventually disengaged, Lorenzo lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the exit as if she weighed nothing at all. "Take me home," Sophia murmured against his throat. "Always," Lorenzo vowed. "Always." Behind them, the warehouse succumbed to flames, consuming Salvador Rossi's ambitions of annihilating Lorenzo Moretti. But ahead, a future unfolded that neither had dared to envision. A future constructed not upon obligation or fear, but upon a love that had persevered through 10 years of shadows and was destined to withstand any forthcoming challenge. Sophia Chen Moretti was no longer Lorenzo's vulnerability. She was his queen, and woe betide anyone who overlooked that truth. Upon their return, the mansion felt transfigured, no longer a prison, but a haven. Sophia guided Lorenzo to their bedroom, her hands remarkably steady despite her ordeal. Though he attempted to conceal it, she discerned the pain in his movements, the careful way he clutched his left side. "Sit," she commanded, gently urging him toward the bed. "Let me examine it." "Sophia, it's nothing." "Lorenzo Moretti, you just tore through half of Chicago to rescue me. The least you can do is allow me to tend to a few cuts." Her voice was firm yet tender, and something within Lorenzo's chest eased at its sound. He settled on the edge of the bed and permitted her to strip away his tattered shirt. Bruises marred his ribs, a deep gash lacerated his shoulder, and his knuckles were raw and bleeding. Sophia vanished into the bathroom, returning with a first aid kit, her actions both efficient and gentle. "My mother was a nurse before she became ill," Sophia explained as she cleansed the most severe wounds. "She taught me how to patch people up." Lorenzo observed her face as she worked, marveling at her serene confidence. Just 12 hours prior, she had been abducted by his adversaries. 6 hours ago, she had witnessed him commit murder in cold blood, and now she was caring for him as if it were the most natural act imaginable. "I regret that you had to witness that," he said quietly, referring to his actions concerning Salvador. "What you did," Sophia interjected, her eyes meeting his, "was protect me. You saved my life, Lorenzo. Do not apologize for that." She completed bandaging his shoulder and proceeded to clean his knuckles. Her touch was delicate, almost reverent, as if she aimed to heal more than just his physical injuries. "Sophia," Lorenzo began, capturing her hands in his, "I need you to grasp something. You are free now. Salvador is deceased. His organization is in disarray. The threat is over. You are at liberty to depart if you wish. I will ensure that you and your mother are cared for, established wherever you desire to go." "Stop!" Sophia's voice was quiet but absolute. She freed her hands and cupped his face, compelling him to look at her. "Lorenzo, I am not staying because I am compelled to anymore. I am not staying because I owe you anything, or because I am afraid, or because I have nowhere else to go." He searched her eyes, hardly daring to hope. "I am staying because I love you," Sophia continued, "because I choose you, because for the first time in my existence, I understand precisely who I am and exactly where I belong." Lorenzo's breath hitched. "And where is that?" Sophia smiled, and it was akin to witnessing the sunrise. "Here with you, as your wife, not because some debt obligated me, but because there is nowhere else I would rather be." Lorenzo then kissed her, pouring 10 years of yearning, fear, and desperate love into the embrace. When they separated, Sophia discerned tears in his dark eyes. "Are you certain?" he whispered. "This life, this world, it is perilous. It is intricate. It is fortunate that I have the most dangerous man in Chicago to protect me," Sophia stated with a smile that made Lorenzo's heart flutter. "Besides, I am tougher than I appear. I survived Salvador Rossi and lived to recount it." 3 weeks later, Sophia found herself by Lorenzo's side in an unfamiliar conference room, encircled by men whose faces she recognized from newspaper headlines and FBI wanted posters. The Chicago families had convened for a meeting, an event unprecedented in over a decade. Sophia wore an elegant yet authoritative black dress, her hair styled to accentuate the strength of her features. Diamond earrings, a wedding gift from Lorenzo that she had finally consented to accept, caught the light. "Gentlemen," Lorenzo announced, his voice effortlessly commanding the room, "I wish you to meet my wife, Sophia Moretti." The men nodded respectfully, but Sophia detected the shrewd calculation in their eyes. They were evaluating her influence, contemplating whether she was merely an adornment or something more substantial. Lorenzo seemed to perceive their thoughts. "Sophia is not merely my wife," he continued, his hand resting on the small of her back. "She is my equal, my partner, my queen. Any dealings you have with me will also include her. Any decisions affecting our family will be made collaboratively." Silence permeated the room as the implications resonated. In their milieu, wives were relegated to the background, protected and cherished, but never privy to business affairs. What Lorenzo proposed was revolutionary. One by one, the men around the table began to rise. Vincent was first, followed by the others, until every man in the room was standing. Then, to Sophia's astonishment, they began to bow, offering subtle nods of acknowledgement and respect that caught her breath. "Mrs. Moretti," Vincent stated formally, "welcome to the family." As Sophia surveyed the room, observing these powerful, dangerous men deferring to her, she reflected on the terrified girl who had stood at the altar just a month prior, that Sophia had been powerless, ensnared by circumstances beyond her control, convinced she was marrying a monster. This Sophia Moretti, queen of Lorenzo's empire, understood differently. She stood beside a man who would move heaven and earth for her, who had spent 10 years safeguarding her from the shadows, who had literally ignited the world when she was taken from him. She was no longer a victim of circumstance. She was an undeniable force. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I anticipate working with all of you." When the meeting concluded and they returned home, Lorenzo drew Sophia into his arms in the foyer of their mansion. "Any regrets?" he asked, searching her face. Sophia contemplated all that had led them to this moment. The coerced marriage, the misunderstandings, the peril, the revelations. Then she envisioned the future unfolding before them, brimming with love and partnership, and the unique power derived from standing united. "None," she declared, meaning it unequivocally, "not a single one." Lorenzo smiled and kissed her, and Sophia reciprocated with all the passion of a woman who had finally discovered her rightful place. In Lorenzo Moretti's arms, within Lorenzo Moretti's world, as Lorenzo Moretti's queen, and she would never again be powerless.